name is Stella Winters. I never meant to fall in love with my best friend's brother. But some forces in the universe are just too powerful to resist. And Carter Hayes had the kind of gravitational pull that could collapse stars. The funny thing about gravity is that you don't notice it until it's gone. Like how astronauts float in space, untethered, until they realize what they're missing. That constant, invisible force holding everything in place. For 3 years, I orbited around Carter, close enough to feel his warmth, but never close enough to burn. Until that rainy night in October when everything changed. I remember the exact moment I first noticed him, not as Lily's annoying older brother, but as someone else entirely. It was summer, 3 years ago. The kind of sticky July evening where the air hangs heavy, like a wool blanket wrapped around your shoulders. Lily and I were lounging by her pool, sweating more than swimming, when he came home from college. 2 years away had transformed him from the lanky boy who used to tease us into something altogether different. "When did your brother like that?" I whispered to Lily, watching him through my sunglasses as he carried his duffel bags inside. She rolled her eyes. "Gross, Stella, that's my brother you're drooling over." But I couldn't help it. Something shifted in me that day, like tectonic plates rearranging themselves, creating new mountains and valleys where flat earth once existed. That was the beginning of it all. The gravity of Carter. The night everything changed started ordinarily enough. I was at Lily's house for our weekly movie night, curled up on the oversized sectional with a bowl of popcorn between us. "I can't believe you've never seen this movie," Lily said, scrolling through Netflix. "It's a classic." I was about to respond when the front door opened, bringing with it the sound of pouring rain, and Carter, drenched from head to toe. "Jesus, it's coming down hard out there," he said, shaking water from his dark hair like a dog after a bath. Lily threw a throw pillow at him. "You're getting water everywhere." He caught the pillow easily, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. That smile that made something in my chest tighten. "Sorry to interrupt ladies' night," he said, his eyes finding mine for just a second too long. "The power's out at my place." And just like that, our duo became a trio. Carter settled into the armchair beside the couch, freshly showered and changed into dry clothes. The scent of his soap drifted over to me, clean and masculine. I tried to toss on the movie, I really did, but my attention kept drifting to him, to the way his fingers tapped against the arm of the chair, to the shadow of stubble along his jaw, to the way he laughed deep and genuine at all the right part. Halfway through the film, Lily's phone rang. "It's work," she groaned, pausing the movie. "I have to take this. Start without me if I'm not back in 5. And then she was gone, leaving Carter and me alone in the dim living room, the only light coming from the paused TV screen. "So," he said after a moment of silence, "how's the photography going?" I blinked, surprised he remembered. "You know about that." He shifted in his seat, leaning forward slightly. "Of course I do. Lily showed me your Instagram. You're really talented, Stella." Something warm unfurled in my chest at his words. "Thanks," I managed, fidgeting with the bracelet on my wrist. "It's just a hobby." "No," he said firmly, his eyes finding mine in the dim light. "It's not just anything. I've seen how you capture people. It's like you see parts of them they don't even know exist." The air between us felt suddenly charged, electric, like the storm outside had somehow made its way into the living room. "I've always wondered," he continued, his voice lower now, "what you'd see if you took my picture." My heart hammered against my ribs. "I don't know," I whispered. I'd have to try. His eyes held mine, unblinking. Maybe you should. The front door slammed then, making us both jump. Lily was back, soaking wet and cursing under her breath. Unbelievable, she fumed, wringing out her hair. My boss wants me to come in, tonight in this weather. Can't someone else cover? I asked, trying to ignore the lingering electricity between Carter and me. Apparently not, she sighed, already heading toward her bedroom. I'm so sorry to bail on movie night. I can drive you home if you want, Carter offered, but Lily was already shaking her head. No way am I making anyone go back out in this. The roads are flooding. She looked between us. Stella, just crash here. You can have the guest room. And that's how I ended up spending the night under the same roof as Carter Hayes, with nothing but a hallway between us, and a storm raging both outside and within me. I couldn't sleep. The guest room was comfortable enough, but my mind wouldn't quiet down. Every creak of the house, every rumble of thunder, had me wondering if it was him, moving around in the darkness. At 2 a.m., I gave up and crept downstairs for a glass of water. The kitchen was dark except for the faint blue glow of the microwave clock. I filled a glass from the tap, leaning against the counter as I drank. Can't sleep either. I nearly dropped the glass at the sound of his voice. Carter stood in the doorway, illuminated briefly by a flash of lightning. He wore only sweatpants, his chest bare, and I forced my eyes to stay on his face. The storm, I said lamely, gesturing vaguely toward the window where rain still lashed against the glass. He nodded, moving into the kitchen. There was something different about him in the darkness, something unguarded. I've always liked storms, he said, reaching past me for a glass. His arm brushed mine, and I suppressed a shiver. They make everything feel more honest somehow. Honest? He filled his glass, then turned to face me. We were standing close, too close, in the narrow space between the counter and the island. Yeah, he said softly, like all the things people hide in the daylight, come out when the sky breaks open. I swallowed hard. What are you hiding, Carter? The question surprised even me. It hung between us, dangerous and thrilling. His eyes searched mine in the darkness. I think you know, Stella. My heart was a wild thing in my chest. Tell me anyway. He set his glass down. I've been watching you for years, he said, his voice barely audible over the storm. Trying not to, but failing miserably. Why try not to? I whispered. Because you're Lily's best friend. He ran a hand through his hair. Because you're off limits in about a dozen different ways. I knew he was right. I knew crossing this line would complicate everything. But in that moment, with lightning flashing through the kitchen windows, I couldn't remember why that mattered. What if, I began, my voice trembling slightly, just for tonight, we pretended those limits didn't exist. The air between us crackled with possibility. His eyes dropped to my lips, then back to my eyes, questioning. I don't think I could go back, he admitted, his voice rough. If we cross this line, Stella, I don't think I could pretend it never happened. The truth of his words sank into me. He was right. There would be no going back from this. Whatever happened next would change everything. I should have walked away, should have said good night, and gone back to the guest room, should have preserved the delicate balance of my life. Instead, I took a step closer, eliminating the space between us. Then don't, I whispered, don't pretend. And then his lips were on mine, and the world tilted on its axis. Kissing Carter was like touching a live wire. Every nerve ending in my body came alive, sparking and crackling with electricity. His hands cradled my face like I was something precious, something that might break or disappear if he held too tightly. But I wasn't fragile, not in that moment. I pressed closer, my hands finding their way to his bare chest, feeling his heart thundering beneath my palm. He made a sound deep in his throat, and then suddenly I was lifted onto the counter, his body between my knees, his mouth never leaving mine. "I've wanted this for so long," he breathed against my lips. "You have no idea." But I did. I had the same ache, the same hunger, burning in my veins. His lips trailed down my neck, and I tilted my head back, eyes closed, lost in the sensation. The storm outside seemed to mirror the one within me, wild and untamed. And then, like a bucket of ice water, a single thought cut through the haze. "Lily." I stiffened, my hands moving to Carter's shoulders to push him back slightly. "Be it," I gasped. "We can't do this. Not like this." He pulled back immediately, his eyes clouded with desire, but also concern. "I'm sorry," he said, stepping away. "I shouldn't have." "No," I interrupted, sliding down from the counter. "It's not that I don't want this. It's just, Lily." The name hung between us, a reality check in the midst of our fantasy. Carter nodded, running a hand over his face. "You're right," he said, his voice strained. "This isn't how it should happen." I smoothed down my t-shirt, trying to regain some composure. "What is happening between us, Carter?" He looked at me for a long moment, his expression serious. "I don't know exactly," he admitted. "But it's not nothing, and it's not new, at least not for me." My heart squeezed at his words. "Not for me either," I confessed. We stood there in the kitchen, the storm still raging outside, two people on the precipice of something that could either be wonderful or disastrous, or maybe both. "We should talk to Lily," I said finally, "before this goes any further." He nodded, though I could see the reluctance in his eyes. "Tomorrow," he agreed. "We'll talk to her tomorrow." I took a step backward, needing distance to clear my head. I should go back upstairs. "Stella," he called softly as I turned to leave. I looked back at him, standing there in the half-dark kitchen, looking both vulnerable and strong. "Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that this, what I feel for you, it's real." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Then I fled back to the guest room, my lips still tingling from his kiss, and my mind racing with what the morning would bring. Morning came too quickly, sunlight streaming through the guest room curtains I'd forgotten to close. For a disorienting moment, I couldn't remember where I was. Then it all came flooding back. The storm, the kitchen, Carter's lips on mine, Carter's confession. Today we would talk to Lily. Today everything would change. I dressed quickly in yesterday's clothes, my stomach a knot of anxiety. When I finally gathered the courage to go downstairs, I found Lily in the kitchen, looking exhausted as she poured herself coffee. "Morning," she yawned, pushing a mug toward me. "I just got in an hour ago." That shift was brutal. Guilt twisted in my gut. While she'd been working all night, I'd been kissing her brother. What kind of friend did that make me? "Thanks," I mumbled, taking the coffee. "How was work?" "Insane," she said, leaning against the counter. The same counter where Carter had lifted me the night before. The storm knocked out power all over town. The hospital was packed. I nodded, unsure what to say next. Where was Carter? Had he changed his mind about talking to Lily? As if summoned by my thoughts, he appeared in the doorway. Our eyes met, and for a brief moment, the world narrowed to just the two of us. Then Lily spoke, shattering the moment. "Carter, did you leave the lights on in the living room all night? The electric bill is going to be ridiculous." He cleared his throat, tearing his gaze from mine. Sorry, he said, moving to the coffee maker. I was downstairs late. An understatement, if I'd ever heard one. Listen, Lil, he began, pouring himself coffee with a slightly unsteady hand. There's something we need to talk to you about. My heart pounded in my ears. This was it. Lily looked between us, confusion creasing her brow. What's going on? But before either of us could answer, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen and groaned. It's work again. Hold that thought. She answered the call, stepping out of the kitchen, leaving Carter and me alone once more. Hey, he said softly, moving closer. Hey, I echoed, my voice barely audible. About last night, he began, but Lily burst back into the kitchen, her face pale. I have to go back in, she said, already moving toward the stairs. There was a multi-car pileup on the highway. They need all hands on deck. Carter frowned. You just worked all night. I know, she called over her shoulder, already halfway up the stairs. Welcome to the life of an ER nurse. We'll talk later, okay? And just like that, our moment of reckoning was postponed. Lily left in a whirlwind of scrubs and travel mug coffee, leaving Carter and me standing awkwardly in the front hallway. I said, fidgeting with my car keys. I guess we'll have to talk to her later. He nodded, running a hand through his hair, a gesture I was coming to recognize as a nervous habit. Stella, about last night. My stomach clenched. Here it comes, I thought, the regret, the backpedaling. I meant what I said, he continued, his eyes finding mine. What I feel for you is real, but I understand if you need time, or if you want to pretend it never happened until we talk to Lily. Relief washed over me. I don't want to pretend, I admitted. But yes, we should wait to act on anything until we've talked to her. He stepped closer, his hand reaching up to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear. The simple touch sent shivers down my spine. Can I see you tomorrow? He asked. Just to talk. There's so much I want to tell you. So much you don't know. I nodded, unable to deny him or myself this. Tomorrow, I agreed. He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his face, made him look younger, lighter. I'll text you, he promised, and with that promise lingering in the air between us, I left, my head spinning with possibilities. True to his word, Carter texted me that night. Coffee tomorrow, 2 p.m. at Groundwork. I stared at the message, a smile playing on my lips. It felt strange, seeing his name on my phone. Strange but right. I'll be there, I replied. Then, after a moment's hesitation, any word from Lily? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. She's staying at a friend's place near the hospital tonight, double shift. Another text followed quickly. We'll talk to her soon, I promise. I texted back a simple, okay, and set my phone aside, a mix of relief and anxiety swirling in my stomach. The conversation with Lily was postponed, but inevitable. What would she say? Would she be angry? Would our friendship survive? The questions circled in my mind like volatiles, picking at my conscience. But beneath the guilt and worry, there was something else, something that felt like hope. The coffee shop was busy when I arrived the next day, filled with the hum of conversation and the hiss of espresso machines. Carter was already there, sitting at a table by the window, 2 cups in front of him. He stood when he saw me, a nervous smile on his face. Hey, he said, pulling out my chair. Hi, I replied, slipping into the seat. You got my coffee already. He nodded, sitting back down. Vanilla latte, right? That's what Lily always gets you. The mention of her name hung between us, a reminder of what we were risking. Right, I said, wrapping my hands around the warm cup. Thanks. For a moment, we just looked at each other, neither sure where to begin. It was different here, in the daylight, in public, no storm to blame, no darkness to hide in. So, I said finally. So, he echoed, a small smile playing at his lips. You said there were things you wanted to tell me. He nodded, taking a deep breath. I've had feelings for you for a long time, Stella. Since that summer when I came home from college and saw you by the pool. My eyes widened. That long? But that was 3 years ago, he finished. Yeah, I know. Why didn't you ever say anything? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. You were my little sister's best friend. You were 19, I was 21. It felt, I don't know, wrong somehow, and by the time I convinced myself it wasn't, you were dating that guy. Alex, I supplied. Right, Alex. His jaw tightened slightly, and then when that ended, I was seeing someone, and it just never seemed like the right time. I took a sip of my latte, processing his words. 3 years is a long time to keep something like that to yourself. Tell me about it, he said, running a hand through his hair. But every time I thought about saying something, I got scared, not just of what Lily would say, but of what you would say, of ruining things between us before they even had a chance to start. His honesty was disarming. I'd never seen Carter this vulnerable, this open. What about you? He asked, his eyes searching mine. When did you? The same day, I admitted, heat rising to my cheeks. By the pool. I asked Lily when you got like that, and she told me I was gross for checking out her brother. He laughed, a genuine laugh that crinkled the corners of his eyes. Seriously, all this time? I nodded, smiling despite myself. All this time. He reached across the table, taking my hand in his. The touch sent electricity up my arm. We've wasted so much time, he said softly. Maybe, I replied, turning my hand to lace my fingers with his. Or maybe we weren't ready before now. His thumb traced circles on the back of my hand, each movement sending shivers of awareness through me. We still need to talk to Lily, I reminded him gently. I know, he said, his expression growing serious. She's coming home tonight. We could tell her then. Anxiety fluttered in my stomach, but I nodded. Tonight then. We spent the next hour talking, really talking, in a way we never had before, about our families, our dreams, our fears. It felt like making up for lost time, filling in all the gaps that 3 years of silence had created. When we finally left the coffee shop, walking out into the crisp autumn air, Carter pulled me close, his arms wrapping around my waist. Whatever happens tonight, he said, his forehead resting against mine, I want you to know that this is worth it to me. You're worth it. And then he kissed me, right there on the sidewalk, with people passing by, a kiss that felt like a promise, like the beginning of something real. If only I'd known then what was waiting for us at home. We agreed to meet at Carter and Lily's house that evening. I spent the hours in between pacing my apartment, rehearsing what I would say, trying to find the words that would make Lily understand, that would make her forgive us. By the time I pulled up to their house, my nerves were frayed and my palms were sweating. Carter's car was in the driveway, but Lily's wasn't. Maybe she was still at work. Maybe we had more time to prepare. I knocked on the door, and Carter opened it almost immediately, his face tight with tension. Hey, he said, stepping back to let me in. Lily's not home yet. She texted to say she'd be here in about 20 minutes. I nodded, following him into the living room. How are you feeling about this? He sank onto the couch, running both hands through his hair. Nervous as hell, he admitted, but also certain. About us, I mean. I sat beside him, close but not touching. Me too, I said softly. He took my hand, squeezing it gently. It's going to be okay, he said, though I wasn't sure if he was reassuring me or himself. We sat there in silence for a few minutes, both lost in our own thoughts, when the sound a key in the lock made us jump apart. Lily was home. She walked in, looking exhausted, her scrubs wrinkled and her hair messily piled on top of her head. She stopped short when she saw us both sitting there, a small frown crossing her face. What's going on? She asked, dropping her bag by the door. Is something wrong? Carter and I exchanged a glance. This was it. Nothing's wrong, he said, standing up. But we do need to talk to you about something. Lily's frown deepened. Okay, that sounds ominous. She moved into the living room, perching on the edge of the armchair opposite us. What is it? I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Lily, I began, my voice steadier than I felt. You know you're my best friend. You're like a sister me, and the last thing I'd ever want to do is hurt you or make things weird between us. Her eyes darted between Carter and me, confusion clear on her face. What are you talking about? Carter stepped forward. Lily, the thing is, Stella and I, we have feelings for each other. Silence fell over the room, thick and heavy. Lily's expression was unreadable. She sat perfectly still, staring first at Carter, then at me. How long? She finally asked, her voice flat. We only just talked about it, I said quickly, the night of the storm, but we wanted to tell you right away, before anything really happened between us. A small lie, but a necessary one. I told myself that kiss in the kitchen didn't count. Not really. Lily stood abruptly, pacing to the window and back. I don't understand, she said, her voice rising slightly. You two barely even talk to each other, and now suddenly you have feelings? She made air quotes around the word. It's not sudden, Carter said quietly. Not for me. I've had feelings for Stella for years. Lily stopped pacing, her eyes widening. Year-end. I nodded, my heart racing. For me, too, I admitted. We just never said anything, to each other or to you. She sank back into the armchair, her expression a mix of shock and something else I couldn't read. Hurt, maybe, or betrayal. So all those times you came over, she said, looking at me. All those sleepovers and movie nights. You were what? Secretly crushing on my brother. Her words stung, making it sound cheap and adolescent. It wasn't like that, I protested. I came over because you're my best friend, because I love spending time with you. But you also wanted to see him, she pressed. I couldn't lie. Not now. Yes, I admitted. Sometimes, but that doesn't change how I feel about you, or our friendship. She laughed, a short, bitter sound. Right. Carter moved toward her. Lily, we're not asking for your permission. We're both adult, but we are asking for your understanding. Your blessing would mean everything to us. She looked up at him, her expression hardening. My blessing, to date my best friend, the same best friend who's been over for every holiday, who knows all our family drama, who I've told all my secrets to. She shook her head. What happens when you two break up? What happens to me then? We don't know what the future holds, I said gently, but we care about each other, and we both care about you. She stood again, this time moving toward the stairs. I need some time, she said, her voice tight with emotion. I can't deal with this right now. Lily, please, I called after her, rising to my feet. She stopped, her back to us. Not now, Stella. And then she was gone, her bedroom door closing with a decisive click. Carter and I stood in silence, the weight of her reaction settling over us. That could have gone better, he said finally, his voice heavy. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold. Could have gone worse too, I pointed out. At least she didn't tell us to go to hell. He smiled weakly, moving to stand in front of me. She'll come around, he said, though I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. She just needs time. I nodded, wanting to believe him. I should go, I said reluctantly. Give her some space. He looked like he wanted to argue, but then nodded. I'll walk you out. At my car, he pulled me into his arms, holding me tightly against his chest. I breathed in his scent, trying to memorize the feeling of being held by him. We did the right thing, he murmured against my hair, telling her. I know, I whispered back, but as I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something precious had just slipped through my fingers. The next 3 days passed in agonizing silence. Lily didn't return my calls or texts. Carter reported that she was barely speaking to him at home, leaving for work early and returning late. She'll talk when she's ready, he told me over the phone, but I could hear the strain in his voice. She's always been like this when she's upset. She retreats. I knew he was right. I'd seen Lily do this before. Shut down, pull away, when she was working through something difficult, but knowing didn't make the waiting any easier. On the 4th day, my phone rang while I was editing photos for a client. Lily's name flashed on the screen, and my heart leapt into my throat. Hello, I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. It's me, she said, her voice guarded. Can we meet? To talk? Relief washed over me. Yes, I said immediately. Where? When? The park, she said. By the lake. In an hour. I'll be there, I promised. After we hung up, I texted Carter to let him know. His response was immediate. Good luck. I love you. The words made my heart stutter. We hadn't said that yet. Not out loud. Not in those exact words, but seeing them there, black on white, I knew they were true. I loved him too. Thank you, I texted back. I'll call you after. I didn't say it back. Not yet. Not like this. Those words deserved to be spoken face to face, heart to heart. The park was quiet when I arrived. Just a few joggers and dog walkers enjoying the mild autumn day. I spotted Lily sitting on a bench by the lake, her red hair bright against the backdrop of golden leaves. She didn't turn as I approached, her gaze fixed on the water. Hey, I said softly, sitting beside her. Hey, she replied, still not looking at me. For a while, we just sat in silence, watching the ripples on the lake surface. A pair of ducks glided by, leaving V-shaped wakes behind them. I'm still mad, she said finally. I nodded, accepting this. I understand. She turned to face me then, her green eyes so like Carter's, searching mine. Do you understand what it feels like to find out your best friend and your brother have been harboring secret feelings for each other for years? To realize that every time we were all together, there was this undercurrent I wasn't aware of. Her words hit me like a physical blow. Put like that, I could see why she felt betrayed. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it. I never meant to hurt you, Lily. Neither did Carter. We didn't act on our feelings, precisely because we didn't want to hurt you. She looked away again, her jaw tight, And yet here we are. Here we are, I agreed quietly. Another silence fell, this one heavier than the last. Do you love him? She asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard, but I didn't hesitate. Yes, I said. She nodded slowly, as if she'd expected as much. And does he love you? I thought of his text, those 3 simple words that had made my world shift. He says he does. A small, sad smile touched her lips. Carter doesn't say things he doesn't mean. I know. She sighed, a deep, weary sound. I'm not going to lie, Stella. This is weird for me. Really weird. And I'm going to need time to adjust. Hope flickered in my chest. But you're not telling us to stay away from each other? She gave a short laugh. Would it matter if I did? I thought about it. Would it? Would I give up Carter if Lily demanded it? The there scared me with its clarity. No, I wouldn't. I couldn't. It would matter, I said carefully, but it wouldn't change how we feel. She nodded, accepting this. That's what I thought. She turned to face me fully. Here's the deal. I'm not going to stand in your way. If you and Carter want to be together, that's your choice. But I need a few ground rules. Anything, I said quickly. Don't flaunt it in front of me. At least, not at first. No excessive PDA. No details about your relationship that I don't need to know. And most importantly, she leaned closer, her expression fierce. If you hurt him, best friend or not, I will make you regret it. And the same goes for him. You're both important to me, and I won't watch either of you destroy the other. I felt tears prick at my eyes, both at her protectiveness and at the realization that she wasn't cutting me out of her life. I promise, I whispered. She nodded once, sharply, then stood. Good. Now let's get coffee. I'm freezing my ass off out here. I stood too, relief making me lightheaded. Lily, yeah, thank you, Zane. She shrugged, but I could see the emotion she was trying to hide. Just don't make me regret it, she said, already walking toward the park exit. I hurried to catch up, knowing that while things weren't perfect, they were at least possible. And for now, that was enough. 3 months passed in a blur of new love and cautious navigation. Carter and I fell into a relationship that felt both brand new and somehow familiar, as if we'd been doing this dance our whole lives. Every day I discovered something new about him. The way he hummed while cooking, how he always slept with one foot sticking out from under the covers, the little wrinkle that appeared between his eyebrows when he was concentrating. And every day I fell a little deeper. Lily kept her word. She didn't interfere. And gradually, the initial awkwardness began to fade. She even joked about it sometimes, calling herself the world's most reluctant matchmaker. Everything was falling into place, one piece at a time, until the day Carter received a phone call that changed everything. We were at my apartment, a rare Saturday when neither of us had to work. I was sorting through photos from a wedding I'd shot the previous weekend, while Carter cooked breakfast pancakes, his specialty. His phone rang, and he answered without checking the caller ID, tucking it between his ear and shoulder as he flipped a pancake. Hello. I watched as his expression changed, the easy smile slipping away, replaced by something more serious. Yes, this is him, he said, setting down the spatula. When did this happen? A pause, his face growing more troubled. I understand, he said finally. Yes, I'll be there. Thank you for calling. He hung up, staring at the phone in his hand as if it had suddenly transformed into something alien. What is it? I asked, setting my laptop aside. Carter? He looked up, his eyes meeting mine, and I saw something there that made my stomach drop. That was the hospital in Boston, he said, his voice strangely flat. My father had a heart attack this morning. I was on my feet immediately, moving to his side. Is he okay? Carter shook his head, not in negation, but in uncertainty. They don't know yet. He's in surgery. He ran a hand through his hair. That familiar nervous gesture. I need to go there. I need to be with him and my mom. Of course, I said, already thinking about what he would need. I'll help you pack. When do you want to leave? As soon as possible, he said, already moving toward the door. I'll book a flight from my place. I need to tell Lily too. I nodded, following him. I'll come with you, I offered. To Boston. He stopped, turning to face me. Stella, he said gently, you have that big wedding next weekend, the one you've been preparing for months. You can't miss that. He was right, and we both knew it. I'd been booked for the Richardsons' wedding for almost a year, a high-profile event that could make or break my fledgling photography career. I can reschedule, I said, but the words sounded hollow even to my own ears. He shook his head, taking my face in his hands. No, you can't, and I wouldn't ask you to. This is your dream, Stella. I'll be fine. I'll keep you updated every step of the way. How long do you think you'll be gone? I asked, hating the selfish question, even as it left my lips. I don't know, he admitted. A week? 2? It depends on how he is. He might need surgery, rehabilitation. I just don't know. I nodded, leaning into his touch. Call me as soon as you land, and when you know anything about your dad. I will, he promised, pressing his forehead to mine. I love you, Stella, so much. I love you too, I whispered, the words still new enough to make my heart race. He kissed me then, a desperate, hungry kiss that tasted like goodbye, even though neither of us said the word. Carter left that evening, catching a red-eye flight to Boston. Lily went with him, taking emergency leave from the hospital. The apartment felt eerily empty without him, though he'd never actually lived there. But over the past months, his presence had seeped into every corner. His favorite coffee mug in my cabinet, a spare toothbrush in my bathroom, the indent of his head on my pillow. True to his word, he called when they landed. We're here, he said, his voice thick with exhaustion. Going straight to the hospital. Dad's out of surgery, but they're keeping him in ICU for now. That's good, right? I said, pacing my living room. But he's out of surgery? He agreed, but I could hear the worry underneath. The next 48 hours are critical, they said. We'll know more then. I wish I was there with you, I said, the words an ache in my chest. Me too, he admitted. But you're here. He tapped his chest, though I couldn't see it, where it counts. After we hung up, I threw myself into work, trying to distract myself from the worry. I had the Richardson wedding to prepare for. After all, a 6-hour event with multiple locations and a shot list as long as my arm. I needed to be focused, ready. But my mind kept drifting back to Boston, to Carter sitting in a hospital waiting room, to the uncertainty hanging over him. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation and worry. Carter called when he could, but the conversations were brief, strained by distance and stress. His father's condition was improving, but slowly. They were talking about a second surgery. Carter and Lily were taking turns at the hospital, supporting their mother, navigating a healthcare system that seemed designed to confuse and frustrate. When are you coming home? I asked one night, the question slipping out before I could stop it. There was a pause on the other end of the line, a pause that stretched just a beat too long. I don't know, he said finally. Dad's still not stable, and Mom's falling apart. I can't leave them like this. Of course not, I said quickly, hating myself for even asking. I understand, I just miss you, that's all. I miss you too, he said, his voice softening. more than you know. But as the days turned into a week, and then 2, I felt him slipping away. Our calls grew shorter, less frequent. His texts, once detailed accounts of his day, became brief updates about his father's condition. It wasn't his fault, I knew. He was dealing with a family crisis, living in a hospital waiting room, watching his father fight for his life. Of course, he didn't have the emotional energy for long, intimate conversations. Of course, his focus was elsewhere. But knowing didn't make the distance any easier to bear. The Richardson wedding came and went, a beautiful, elaborate affair that would have thrilled him under any other circumstances. As it was, I moved through it on autopilot, clicking the shutter, directing poses, capturing moments with professional precision, while my heart was hundreds of miles away. When I sent Carter some of the photos, hoping to share at least a part of my day with him, his response was a thumbs-up emoji, and nothing more. I told myself not to read into it, told myself he was just busy, just tired, just focused on his family. But the knot of anxiety in my stomach grew with each passing day. And then, 3 weeks after he'd left, I got the text I'd been both hoping for and dreading. Coming home tomorrow. We need to talk. 5 words that changed everything. Again, I picked him up from the airport, my stomach a tangle of nerves. He looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes, his usual easy grace replaced by a bone-deep weariness. But when he saw me, a smile broke through the fatigue, and for a moment, everything felt right again. "Hey," he said, pulling me into a tight hug. I breathed him in, memorizing the feeling of his arms around me. "Hey, yourself," I murmured into his chest. "How was the flight?" "Long," he said, pulling back to look at me. His eyes searched my face, as if trying to relearn its contours. "God, I missed you." Relief washed over me. Maybe I'd been worrying for nothing. Maybe we need to talk didn't mean what I feared it meant. "How's your dad?" I asked as we walked to my car. "Better," Carter said, his expression brightening slightly. "They're releasing him to a rehabilitation facility tomorrow. It's going to be a long road, but the doctors are cautiously optimistic." "That's wonderful news," I said, genuinely relieved. I might not have met Richard Hayes, but I knew how much he meant to Carter. We drove back to my apartment in comfortable silence, his hand resting on my thigh, a reassuring weight. But underneath the surface calm, I could feel something brewing, something in the set of his shoulders, the way his fingers occasionally tightened on my leg, then relaxed, as if he was having an internal debate. At my place, he sank onto the couch with a grateful sigh, closing his eyes for a moment. I brought him a glass of water, which he accepted with a tired smile. "You look like you could sleep for a week," I said, sitting beside him. "Feel like it too," he admitted. Then, setting the glass down, he turned to face me. "Stella, we need to talk." There it was, the phrase that had been echoing in my head since his text. "Okay," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm listening." He took a deep breath, as if gathering his courage. "My dad's recovery is going to take time. Months, probably. My mom can't handle it alone. She's barely holding it together as it is. And Lily has to get back to work." I nodded, beginning to see where this was going. "You're going back to Boston?" "Yes," he said, relief flickering across his face, as if glad I'd made the connection. "I've already talked to my boss. I can work remotely for a while, maybe permanently, if that's what it takes." "When?" I asked, the word barely audible. 2 days, he said, "just enough time to pack up some things, tie up loose ends here." I nodded, trying to absorb this. 2 days. After 3 weeks apart, we'd have just 2 days together before he left again, possibly for good. And us? I asked, the question I'd been dreading. What happens to us? He reached for my hand, entwining our fingers. That's what I wanted to talk about. He took a deep breath. I love you, Stella. These past 3 weeks have been hell, not just because of my dad, but because I couldn't be with you. I don't want to lose what we have. Hope flickered in my chest. So, long distance, he nodded, squeezing my hand. I know it won't be easy, but we can make it work. Flights aren't that expensive. We can visit each other, video call every day. I wanted to believe him, wanted to believe we could bridge the 1,000 miles between us. But something nagged at me, a doubt I couldn't quite shake. For how long? I asked. How long would it be long distance? His eyes dropped, avoiding mine. I don't know, he admitted. Dad's recovery will take time, and even after that, he and Mom might need help. They're not getting any younger. I understood what he wasn't saying. This wasn't a temporary arrangement. This was the beginning of a new normal. Him in Boston, me here, for months, maybe years. Maybe years. Carter, I said slowly, the words painful to speak. We've only been together for 3 months. That's not a lot of foundation for the kind of strain long distance puts on a relationship. His face fell, hurt flashing in his eyes. Are you saying you don't think we can handle it? I'm saying I don't know, I answered honestly. I've never done this before. Neither have you. He pulled away slightly, his expression closing off. So what are you suggesting? That we just end things? After everything we've been through to be together? The pain in his voice cut me to the quick. No, I said quickly. That's not what I want. I'm just scared, Carter. Scared that distance will change things. Scared that one day you'll realize it's too hard, too complicated, and you'll wish you'd made a clean break now. Is that what you think of me? He asked, his voice low. That I'd just give up on us? No, I whispered, tears threatening. I think you'd try. I think we'd both try. But I also think love sometimes isn't enough. Sometimes circumstances are stronger than feelings. He stood abruptly, pacing to the window and back. So that's it? You're giving up before we even try? I'm not giving up, I protested, rising to face him. I'm being realistic. Realistic, he repeated, the word bitter on his tongue. Sounds like an excuse to me. Anger flared in me, surprising in its intensity. An excuse? You're the one leaving, Carter. You're the one choosing Boston over. I cut myself off, horrified at what I'd been about to say. But it was too late. He'd heard the unspoken accusation. Over you, he finished, his voice dangerously quiet. Is that what you think this is? A choice? No, I backpedaled, shame washing over me. I didn't mean it like that. I know you have to go. I know your family needs you. Do you? He challenged, because it sounds like you think I'm abandoning you. Like you think I want to leave. I don't think that, I insisted. But even to my own ears, the protest sounded weak. He shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping him. You know what's ironic? I spent 3 years afraid to tell you how I felt, because I thought it would ruin everything. And now that we're finally together, it's falling apart anyway. His words hit me like a physical blow. It doesn't have to, I said, desperation creeping into my voice. We can try the long distance. We can make it work. But even as I said it, I knew I didn't fully believe it. And worse, I knew he could tell. He looked at me for a long moment, his expression a mixture of hurt, anger, and resignation. I think, he said, finally, his voice carefully controlled, that I should go. We both need some time to think. Carter, I began, but he was already moving toward the door. I'll call you tomorrow, he said, not looking back, and then he was gone, the door closing behind him, with a quiet click that somehow hurt more than a slam would have. I sank back onto the couch, tears finally breaking free. What had just happened? How had a conversation about making things work turned into what felt like a goodbye? I wanted to run after him, to tell him I was sorry, that I was just scared, that of course we could make it work. But something held me back, because the truth was, I wasn't sure we could, and pretending otherwise would only make the inevitable separation more painful. So I stayed where I was, let the tears fall, and tried to ignore the voice in my head that whispered I just made the biggest mistake of my life. Carter didn't call the next day. I waited, phone in hand, jumping at every notification, but his name never appeared on my screen. By evening, anxiety had given way to a dull certainty. This was at the end before we'd really begun. I thought about calling him, but what would I say? That I'd changed my mind? That I believed in us now? The words would ring hollow, forced by desperation rather than conviction. Instead, I did what I always did when my emotions became too much to handle. I picked up my camera. Photography had always been my escape, my therapy. Through the viewfinder, the world became manageable, framed and contained. I could control what was in focus and what blurred into the background. I drove to the beach. Though it was nearly dark, the November air sharp with the promise of winter. The sky was a palette of purples and deep blues, the last light fading over the horizon. Perfect golden hour, turning to blue hour, the most beautiful, fleeting light. I took photo after photo, losing myself in the rhythm of it. Adjust settings, frame, focus, shoot over and over, as if I could somehow capture and hold on to this moment, this pain, this transition from light to darkness. It was fully dark when my phone finally buzzed. My heart leapt, then sank when I saw it wasn't Carter, but Lily. Are you okay? A simple question, but it unraveled me. Before I knew it, I was typing back. No, I think it's over. Her response was immediate. Where are you? Sunset Beach. Stay there, I'm coming. 30 minutes later, headlights cut through the darkness as Lily's car pulled into the small parking lot. I was sitting on the hood of my own car, camera beside me, staring out at the invisible ocean, listening to the rhythm of waves. I couldn't see. She didn't say anything at first, just climbed up beside me. Our shoulders touched. For a while, we sat in silence, the only sound the distant crash of surf and the occasional car passing on the highway behind us. He's leaving tomorrow, she said finally. I nodded, throat too tight for words. He told me what happened, she continued, or his version of it. Anyway, I glanced at her, wondering whose side she was on, mine or her brother's. But her expression wasn't accusatory, just sad. What did he say? I asked, my voice rough from crying. She shrugged. That you didn't think long distance could work, that you were being realistic. She made air quotes around the word. I winced. That's sort of true, but not all of it. I figured, she said. Carter can be selective in what he chooses to remember sometimes. Despite everything, a small laugh escaped me. That's putting it mildly. She smiled, a quick flash in the darkness. So what really happened? I took a deep breath, organizing my thoughts. I'm scared, Lily. Terrified, actually. We've only been together for 3 months, and now we're facing who knows how long apart. What if we can't handle it? What if we drift apart, slowly and painfully, until there's nothing left but resentment and regret? She nodded slowly, absorbing this. And you think ending things now is better than risking that? Put like that, it sounded cowardly. I don't know what I think anymore. I admitted, I just know I'm scared of losing him. And somehow that translated into pushing him away first, which makes no sense at all. Actually, she said, it makes perfect sense. It's basic self-protection. If you end it, at least you're in control. At least you're not waiting for the other shoe to drop. I looked at her, surprised by her insight. When did you get so wise about relationships? She laughed. Just because my love life is a disaster doesn't mean I can't see clearly when it comes to other people. We fell silent again, the weight of the situation settling over us. He's hurting, she said eventually. I've never seen him like this, not even after Sarah. Sarah, Carter's college girlfriend, the one who'd broken his heart junior year. He rarely talked about her, but I knew the relationship had ended badly. I never meant to hurt him, I whispered. I know, she said simply, and I think, deep down, he knows that too. What should I do, Lily? She sighed, leaning back against the windshield. I can't tell you that. Only you know what you can handle, what you're willing to risk. She turned to look at me. But I will tell you this. My brother doesn't fall in love easily, and when he does, it's what he feels for you. I've never seen him like this before. Not with anyone. Her words sank into me, a stone dropping into still water, sending ripples out. His flight's at noon tomorrow, she said, sliding off the hood of the car. Just in case you wanted to know. She left me there, alone with my thoughts and the invisible ocean, the sound of waves a constant reminder that some forces are beyond our control, beyond our understanding, like gravity, like love. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I uploaded the photos I'd taken at the beach, editing them one by one, losing myself in the process. Most were nothing special, dark, moody seascapes that reflected my state of mind more than any artistic vision. But one stood out. It was a shot of the horizon just after sunset, that liminal moment when the sky still holds light, but the earth has turned to shadow. In the foreground, a single figure stood at the water's edge, a stranger, someone I hadn't even noticed when taking the photo. They were silhouetted against the remnants of daylight, their reflection stretching across the wet sand, creating a perfect mirror image. Two versions of the same person, reaching toward each other, across an impossible divide. He stared at the image for a long time, something shifting inside me as I did. Maybe it was a sign, maybe it was just a coincidence, but in that moment, I knew what I had to do. By 10 a.m., I was at Carter's door, heart pounding in my chest. He opened it on the second knock, surprise flashing across his face when he saw me. He looked terrible, like he hadn't slept either. His hair a mess, shadows under his eyes. A half-packed suitcase lay open on the floor behind him. Stella, he said. My name a question. I managed, suddenly unsure what to say. All the speeches I'd rehearsed on the drive over fled my mind, leaving nothing but raw emotion. What are you doing here? What he asked. Not unkindly, but with a weariness that broke my heart. I took a deep breath. I made a mistake, I said simply. I was scared, and I let that fear talk me out of something I really want, something I need. He didn't move, didn't invite me in. And what's that? I said, my voice breaking on the word. Us. Even if it's hard, even if it's long distance, even if it hurts sometimes, I want to try. I need to try. Something flickered in his eyes. Hope, maybe, or uncertainty. What changed? I pulled out my phone, bringing up the photo I'd edited last night. This, I said, handing it to him. I took it yesterday, after our fight. He looked at it, brow furrowing slightly. It's beautiful, he said, but I don't understand. That person, I explained, pointing to the silhouette. I didn't even see them when I took the photo, but look at their reflection, how it creates this perfect mirror image. Two versions of the same person, separated but still connected. I took a shaky breath. That's us, Carter. Even when we're apart, even when there's distance between us, we're still connected, still reaching for each other. His expression softened, the wariness giving way to something warmer. Stella, I love you, I interrupted, the words rushing out. I love you, and I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of letting fear make my decisions for me. I want to be brave enough to try this, to try us, no matter what comes next. For a long moment, he just looked at me, his face unreadable. Then, slowly, he stepped aside, opening the door wider. Come in, he said quietly. I stepped past him into the apartment, my heart still racing. He closed the door behind me, then turned, his eyes finding mine. I was going to come see you, he said, before my flight. I couldn't leave things the way they were. Relief washed over me. What were you going to say? A small smile touched his lips. Pretty much what you just said, that I love you too much to let fear win, that we deserve a chance, even if it's complicated, even if it's hard. He stepped closer, his hand coming up to cup my cheek. I was up all night thinking about gravity, he said, his voice low. Gravity, I echoed, confused by the sudden change in topic. He nodded, his thumb tracing my cheekbone. It's the weakest of the 4 fundamental forces in physics. Did you know that? Weaker than electromagnetism, weaker than the strong and weak nuclear forces. And yet, his eyes held mine, intense and serious. It's the only one we can feel, the only one that shapes our everyday lives, the only one that keeps us grounded, that brings things back to earth. Understanding dawned slowly. Like us, I whispered. Like us, he agreed. What's between us might seem weak compared to all the forces pulling us apart. Distance, time, circumstance. But it's the only thing I can feel, the only thing that matters. Tears filled my eyes, but they were different now. Tears of relief, of joy, of something that felt like coming home. The gravity of us, I said softly. The gravity of us, he echoed. And then he was kissing me, his lips finding mine with a certainty that banished all doubt. We would make this work. Somehow, some way. We would find a path forward together, because some forces in the universe are just too powerful to resist. 6 months later, I stepped off a plane in Boston, camera bag slung over my shoulder, excitement bubbling in my chest. Carter was waiting for me at the arrivals gate, a bouquet of sunflowers in his hand, and a smile that still made my heart skip. The moment he saw me, he crossed the distance between us in long strides, wrapping me in an embrace that felt like coming home. Welcome back, he murmured against my hair. It's good to be back, I said, meaning it with every fiber of my being. This was my 3rd visit in 6 months, his 2nd back to see me. We'd fallen into a rhythm of sorts, 2 weeks together, 6 weeks apart, then together again. Not ideal, but workable, sustainable, even. It hadn't been easy. There were nights when the distance felt insurmountable, Days when a pixelated video call was a poor substitute for a touch, a kiss, a physical presence. But we'd made it work, one day at a time. And somewhere along the way, the fear had receded, replaced by a quiet confidence that we were exactly where we were meant to be, doing exactly what we were meant to do. "I have news," Carter said, as we drove from the airport, his hand finding mine across the console. "Good news or bad news?" I asked, studying his profile. "Good," he said, a smile playing at his lips. "Dad's doctor cleared him to be alone overnight, and Mom's got her sister visiting next weekend." I raised an eyebrow. "Meaning?" His smile widened. "Meaning you and I can get away. Just the two of us." I was thinking the Cape. Warmth spread through me at the thought. A weekend alone with Carter. No interruptions, no responsibilities, just us. "That sounds perfect," I said, squeezing his hand. "Or something else," he said, his tone shifting slightly. "Something I've been wanting to talk to you about." A flutter of nervousness tickled my stomach. "Oh?" He nodded, eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Dad's doing really well. Better than the doctors expected, actually. He's talking about going back to work part-time next month." "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely pleased. I'd met Richard Hayes on my first visit to Boston, and despite his gruff exterior, I'd liked him immediately. The feeling, somewhat surprisingly, had been mutual. "It is," Carter agreed, "and it means I might be able to come home, not right away, but soon, maybe by the end of summer." My heart leapt, then stuttered. "Home?" He glanced at me, a question in his eyes. "Yeah, home, unless you don't want." "No," I interrupted quickly. I want. I don't want you to feel like you have to. If your parents still need you, they're doing okay," he said, turning his attention back to the road. "Better every day, and I've been thinking, maybe it's time for me to focus on what I need, on what we need." Something warm unfurled in my chest, a cautious hope. "And what do we need?" He smiled, a slow, sure smile that reached all the way to his eyes. "To be together," he said simply, "to stop fighting gravity." Later that night, lying in his arms in his small Boston apartment, I thought about the journey that had brought us here, about all the near misses and almost moments, the years of silence, and the night that changed everything, about the choices we'd made and the fears we'd faced. It hadn't been easy, and it still wasn't. There were still challenges ahead, still uncertainties, but as I drifted towards sleep, Carter's heart beat steady beneath my ear. I knew with bone-deep certainty that this, what we had, what we'd built, was worth every moment of struggle. Because some forces in life can't be explained or controlled. Some forces just are, like the pull between two bodies, like the gravity of us. Wow, what a journey Stella and Carter took us on, right? Sometimes the strongest force in our lives isn't what pulls us apart, but what keeps drawing us back together. If this story touched your heart or made you think about the gravity in your own life, I'd love to know in the comments below. This is just one of many stories I'm excited to share with you, each one carefully crafted to take you on an emotional journey just like this one. If you enjoyed the gravity of us, please hit that like button to help others find this story too. And if you want to be the first to hear new stories as they're released, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Your support means everything. It's what allows me to keep creating these stories for you. Each like, comment, and subscription is the gravity that keeps me coming back to share more. Until next time, thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next story.